Welcome to part 1 of a 5-episode tutorial series. We'll be taking this Ultimate Edition ET Starship resin cast kit, available from the link in the video description, and building it up into a finished display with animated lighting effects. This is a very involved feature-length 5-episode affair, but don't be fooled. I completed this build in less than 6 days from start to finish. I have some great surprises in store for you. In part 1, we'll trim the parts and base paint them. We wrap up part 1 with wiring LEDs into the engine bells. In part 2, we will finish painting and begin weathering the parts, using a variety of techniques. Notably, we utilize Archive X paints, Black 3.0, and texturing effects using sand. We finish part 2 with wiring the main hull with LEDs. In part 3 of this series, I teach you how to assemble the landing gear and finish the lower hull. We conclude with the completely finished lower half of this starship. Part 4 addresses the antenna and dome. We will be using automotive paints and applying a lumiluster for a chrome finish. We conclude with episode 5, where I'll be showing you how to achieve spectacular animated lights using inexpensive, off-the-shelf components. I go into great detail how to attach the lighting gear to a specially designed light core. We'll finish with instruction on how to create a display base, complete with miniature figures. Let's get to it. So let's start by examining our parts. These are all compression molded. There's no seam lines on any of these pieces to clean up, but you do want to address the bottoms since they are compression molded. You want to kind of come in here and flush up these bottoms if there's any flashing at that compression meet point. So we'll just take these pieces and run them across some sandpaper and just kind of check things out. Should just take a minute on each piece. Just kind of go through it, clean up any areas that need some attention. Get things nice and flat. You've got 9 engine bells. I pre-trimmed the flashing off, but you still want to look at them. Just make sure it's all off. You'll do it for the rings. You're going to want to make sure that you've got no flashing left at the top of this ring. Might be a good idea to run the chips a couple of times so that we have a nice flush meet when this all stacks together. The feet. I'm going to run this dome on the bottom edge just a couple of times. Just to flush up this bottom. It's actually looking pretty good. And that should do it for the trim on this dome. The flashing on the bottom engine bell can just be knocked out with a little brush. And if you're going to light this model, that's all you need to do is just clean up those edges and run the bottom across. And that is ready for paint. It's the same situation with the landing gear. These are your 3 main components. There's multiples of these. So just see if there's anything that needs to be sanded flush. There'll be 6 of these pieces. There'll be 3 of these octagonal pylons. And there'll be 3 of these foot connectors. And really, that's all they need. These are ready for assembly. Not every part of every casting is going to be perfect. You might see a couple little air bubbles. Even though these are pressure cast, sometimes there's little micro chips. It just depends on how detailed you want to get, but there's a little tiny little bubble, microscopic bubble there. On this one looks pretty darn good. That one actually is perfect. But I noticed on the dome, there's a little air bubble right here, and we're going to patch those real quick and easy using Magic Sculpt, Epoxy Sculpt. Any kind of a two-part epoxy putty will work. Today we're using Magic Sculpt. We'll just push on a little bit of this Magic Sculpt and push it in where it needs to go. Perfect. And then just smooth it out. A little bit of moisture on this will help smooth it. And then give that a few hours to dry. It's actually pretty darn good. And then just go ahead and sand it, and you are done. I found one little spot on this ring. There's a little gap right here. So that's going to be super easy to fill. I just grab my putty, I squeeze it on, I wipe off that excess, scrape off the excess, flatten it out. I'm going to let that cure, give it a little bit of sand, and that will be finished and ready for paint. We're going to start this language ring off in a bright silver. This is Rust-Oleum Bright Silver. So top and bottom, you want to let this set for a few hours before you start messing with it. So I'm going to give this a coat on the bottom and then the top of it. These are your 9 3D printed engine bowel attachments. And we are going to primer these. They shouldn't need any cleanup, or if any of these do need cleanup, it'll just be really simple. But these are very, very clean parts. But we want to see what we're doing. So let's go ahead and primer these guys. I talked about how strong these are in my introduction video, so go ahead and watch that one and you'll believe me. Okay, so these are these 3D printed parts. Let me show you how to address the other parts. These 3 parts are FDM printed. We're going to use a high fill primer. This is Duplicolor, available at most auto stores. It's a red high fill primer. This will very quickly, just after about 2 or 3 coats, will eliminate those build lines. So I'm just going to start these off with 1 coat. I'm going to let it dry up for half hour or so, come in with the second, let that dry for an hour or so, and then finish it off with a 3rd coat. But this, just with 1 coat, really gets rid of those build lines. This is the lower hull ring. We're going to paint this silver, and you can either leave this paper on or take it off. I'm just going to take it off. I'm going to prep this engine band for lighting, and that means drilling holes for 3mm LEDs. So there will be 3 holes for 9 sections. You need a little bit of wiggle room to get that LED in. So I'm going to drill that, and then from behind, you can see this, I'm going to come in and widen that hole from behind just a little bit. Being careful not to go all the way through. And doing that will allow me to insert this 3mm LED in, and just with a little bit of pushing will allow that LED to be just barely underneath the surface of that hole. let's address these engine bells. Here's your engine bell connection arm, all one piece. And you'll see an indication, well, you'll see two holes, one here and one here. Those accept these tabs. We need to deepen those up so that they fit. I've already done one of these here as a test sample. So you can see I drilled a small hole here and a slightly larger hole here, and they just accept that arm. And there you go. It's just two pieces, really simple. I'm going to drill a hole for a 5mm light right, you can see a little divot point right there in the center. So I'm going to drill a 5mm hole there. The wires are going to come out right in between these two holes, right there. So I'll drill a hole here, I'll drill this hole deep enough to meet that channel so I can feed in that LED and pull the wires out of that spot. Make sure that you're drilling your middle access hole down at an angle. So you're making a channel. You're drilling a hole up through this 5mm and then a slightly smaller bit down this way to meet it. You're making a tunnel. You're going to need to pass a wire through this into the engine band. I'm using a really small bit. Use the smallest bit possible, and you want to drill very, very slowly into this 3D printed resin. All the way through. So now we've got an access point for that wiring to pass right through there. We're going to need to match that hole in the engine band. So I can actually drill a larger hole, and that would be about right here. And I'll switch out the drill bit in a second, but I'm just going to show you just on this one. Okay, right there. There is our access hole for passing the wire through the bell, through the attachment arm assembly, and into the interior. Okay, here's how these look now. We have our two holes to mount the arm. We have our center hole for the wire to come through. We have our LED in place. I'll get to that little piece later. And then we've got our holes in each of these rings to allow the wire to come through. And those will mount in there like this with the wire popping through that access hole. I'm going to go ahead and primer this bottom hole gray. I'm going to be lighting this engine bell, and you'll see there's a ring of light, there's a ring of holes on the bottom edge, this edge here. So I want to see a little bit of light go through there. So I'm just going to drill these guys out the rest of the way. This is already molded inside and out, so it's already hollow. And that hole is already halfway there. So just go ahead and finish them all. I've got copper mixed with silver, maybe about 10% silver, 90% copper. So we've got this translucent piece, and I designed this just to pressure fit. It's a little bit tight because of the paint now. There, but that'll pressure fit right inside. And the blue lenses pressure fit into their openings. Okay, so my lenses are in there. I'm going to adhere these from the inside using on each just a little bit of a spot of clear Elmer's glue. Don't use CA on these lenses because it'll fog them. Use something like this, just like a glue that turns transparent. This is my favorite, Elmer's Clear. Okay. Transparent lenses all installed in the lower engine bell. This little section on the bottom of the bottom engine bell transforms from yellow to orange, going up. I'm going to fade it to orange. Might add a little bit of red to this. Okay, that's it. I've got a little bit of fade, yellow up to a saturated orange, reddish color. Let's move on. The language ring and the lower hull ring are they're already pre-painted silver. We need to make this a champagne silver. Got to tint this. So I've got gold, heavily diluted down, and I'm just going to be introducing a little bit of that rich color into the surface just to give it that slight warmth, champagne color. That's how Craig and I have been describing this color. So pretty even tone. The base color of the middle hull ring, I'm painting Archive X Reefer White. The antenna tower also Reefer White, and the top pieces of the antenna itself, these guys, I'll base tone in Reefer White. I added just a tiniest touch of deck tan to that Reefer White. I just wanted it a tad bit creamier, and I got there. That is the perfect base color. These parts have all had a while to dry, so I'm going to protect these finishes using a matte clear. I just use a Rust-Oleum simple matte clear here. For painting these engine bells and the attachment arms and the bottom rings, I am using a custom green color that is a mix of Tamiya khaki drab, Tamiya medium gray, and I also have deep green Tamiya. And I come up with this gray-green color. This is just a base color, by the way. I'll be coming in with grime and several layers of washes to weather these down. So we're just getting these base toned. Alright, we'll do that times 9. I'm going to begin staining these, making them a little bit darker, a little grittier. But before I do, I'd like to seal with a matte clear. Because that was an acrylic I put down. And I might be coming in here with some washes of enamel, which uses a different solvent, so just want to protect this base coat. We are going to apply our first layer of filtering onto these engine bells and attachment arms. I'm starting this with a 50-50 mix of engine grime and streaking effects from AK Interactive. So I've got a little slurry here. I've got it pretty loose with some isopropyl alcohol. And what I'm going to do with each bell and each engine ring, and these are just temporarily on here. These just pressure fit. Okay, so what I want to do is just apply this grime mixture onto the bell and arm sporadically. And then wipe it off. Dab it off. Stipple. So I loosened up the paint, so now I'm basically just brushing it on and not using the towel. Okay, so I know it's kind of hard to tell color right now. It looks really dark on camera, but this is still a nice shade of green. I'm going to shade these parts now, just get them a little bit darker. And we're just going to use a very light touch, low pressure on this airbrush. I've got a very dark gray, not quite black, but almost black. And I'm going to get really far away from these. Just give them a quick dust. So each of these 9 rings, just a tiny bit of a kiss of paint, dark paint. And then with each bell, they're kind of bright. This doesn't really read on camera very well. But I'm just going to come in here and shade them just a little bit. Mute down that dark, the green color. I'm going to use this airbrush to pre-shade this flat base. We're using a special paint, black 3.0 on that. But I'm just going to give it a little bit of a primer, each one of these first, just to black that out tiny bit. Okay, I think that is it for this stage. Let me introduce you to black 3.0. This is the blackest black paint you can possibly get. It's the mattest matte paint as of this taping in the world. So we're using that to shadow, to completely black out this bottom ring. I already have a little bit of a pre-shade going, but this will literally make it disappear into that well. So this might take 1 or 2 coats. I'm not really sure. I've only used this once before, and it is astonishing. You will not be able to see this back ring once it's inside that well. Okay, here we go again with the black 3.0. So the idea is these arms slide in. These are already going to be blacked out, but we need to black out this divot, this little divot point right there. On the film used model, this is actually cut out, but this one isn't. But we're making up for that by making it disappear into shadow completely. So when this is in here, it'll look like it's just, there's nothing there. It looks like it'll be cut out. So again, very carefully, and we don't really need to bother with back here with the flat plane back there, because that's completely covered up. But we're only doing this. We're not doing the walls, only this divot. I blacked out these guys, so now when these insert, they literally just disappear into shadow. The insides of these divot wells are silver. I've got a silver pen here, and I'm just going to color in these guys chromey. Each one. And we're going to be doing a lot of weathering on this ring. So I'll probably have to reapply this chrome, but at least this is a head start. Let's wire up these engine bells. These are pre-wired LEDs, 5mm white from Amazon. It's a package of 50 for like $7. So I'm going to use 9 of these for these bells. And I'm going to get super anal with this because there's a black wire and a red wire. If you look really closely at the film used ET Starship, there's a black and a red. Here's my procedure for how we're going to wire these bells. First, before you start, just like Randy teaches us, make sure you test your LED first. Just make sure that guy is working. Fish it up through that center hole That was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I'm going to jam that LED in there. And now we're taking these two wires. We're going to bring them up through the top arms, through the hole that's there. You can see it's going through the top. And I'm going to take these two wires, and I believe the red wire is on the left side. And we're going to feed it through this bracket. Black wire through this bracket. I'm going to cinch them up. And now we can glue, finally, the bell to the arm. I'm not going to feed these wires through that hole that we made, because we need to glue these first and make sure they're a 90-degree adhesion. And to do that, I've got a 90-degree jig here. This is made simply with a 90-degree bracket from Home Depot. And all I'm going to do is just hold the bell flush, hold the arm flush, grab some super glue, and just put a couple dabs there at the connections, and those will be perfectly 90 degrees. Let's go ahead and install the rest of the ringlet parts down underneath these bells. So this is part of the add-on deluxe kit. These are opaque white, they're called Sign White acrylic, and they're protected with a layer of tape. As I laser cut these, I want to prevent burns on the edges, so peel that tape off of each one. And these are going to pressure fit inside of each bell. Just give it a little push. Okay, so here's that, and then we are going to be using these laser cut screens. This comes with the standard kit, and that is topped by the ringlet, and there is your final look. Okay, yeah, that is nice and bright. It's going to look terrific. Okay, let's go on to one more layer of texture. This is the end of episode 1. I hope you're enjoying Project ET Starship, the Ultimate Edition. If you are, please share with your hobbyist friends and make sure to subscribe to my channel. Click on the bell icon to see when the next content is published. My channel contains over 15 years of detailed tutorials, which I think you'll find useful. Thanks for your support. Click part 2 to continue this build-up.